The June 8, 2020 work session of the Williamsburg City Council will come to order. Ms. Felico, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Maslin,
Here.
Ms. Ramsey,
Here.
Mayor Freiling,
Here.
Vice Mayor Pons,
Here.
Mr. Zhang.
Here.
Before we start on today's agenda, I'd ask my colleagues to indulge me the opportunity just to say a few words. Today is City Council's first meeting since the tragic killing of George Floyd at the hands of those who were sworn to protect him. The abuse that he suffered was unconscionable and horrific as he begged for his life. But even more sadly, it was not new. In recent weeks, we've also seen and heard about the killings of Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor. In the months and years prior to that, there have been many other such horrible situations where unarmed people of color were killed. It is a disgraceful legacy. In situations past, some have responded with defenses that always seem to begin with, yes, but, or, well, but what about? Well, no more. No more yes, buts. No more what abouts. The response now needs to be from all corners. How do we band together to stop the violence on people of color and Black people in particular? How do we finally root out and destroy the underlying hatred and discrimination that leads to these behaviors and likewise leads to our nation seemingly tolerating? How do we also end the passive forms of racism that plague our country? We do not pretend to have all the answers right now, but we are determined to meet those difficult questions head on. At times, the conversations will be uncomfortable, likely even painful, but we must persevere. I've heard some respond to the recent killings, well-meaning as they are, with enough is enough. Well, I respectfully disagree. The enough we have experienced is far, far too much. Now, if I may address the protests we are witnessing. Almost 4 years ago, a man named Colin Kaepernick started his own form of peaceful protest against the grievous treatment he was seeing. He was not disruptive. He did not even say a word. Initially, he just stayed seated. That was until he had a conversation with an Army veteran, a former Green Beret, who suggested it would be more respectful to kneel. So that is what he did. He knelt. But he was told that as much as he had a right to protest, he just wasn't doing it correctly. He was being disrespectful to the flag, the national anthem, and the military. But he was only protesting documented police brutality and repeatedly said his actions were not intended as any slight to the military or their sacrifices. As time went on, some of his colleagues joined him, and they too were told that they were not protesting in the right way. Eventually, Mr. Kaepernick lost his job and perhaps the remainder of his career, all because he had the courage to kneel for a cause he believed in. Now we are seeing the pain that has been bottled up for so long bursting out. Pain that has left indelible scars on the psyches and the bodies of so many of our fellow citizens, our brothers and sisters. Yes, there's been some violence and destruction in the wake of some of these protests, but I would very much like to commend the protesters who have demonstrated here in Williamsburg for doing an admirable job. They are peaceful and well organized. Do they cause some traffic delays? Sure. Do they make some people feel uncomfortable? Absolutely. That is the entire point. To the Williamsburg Action Group and Black Lives Matter, we greatly appreciate your efforts. Yesterday, thanks to the dedication and hard work of Pastor Corwin Hammond and many others, our community witnessed a wonderful reaffirmation of the covenant between local law enforcement and the African American community that was first signed in 2017. It was a very large gathering that was bolstered with representatives from the various faith communities and citizens of all backgrounds from around our area. Although not a protest, the message of this event was in harmony with the other demonstrations, and that is that we cannot heal until we treat the disease from which we suffer. In no way, shape, or form is this the last you will hear on this topic. We have much work to do, and we welcome everyone to join in. It won't be easy, but it will be one of the most meaningful things that we could ever accomplish. Thank you. With that, I'd like to move on to today's agenda. And the first item on there is item of special privilege. I'd like to ask Ms. Shelton to do a recap for us. Over the past several years, Council has been receiving questions, calls, concerns about the Confederate monument in Bicentennial Park. And we, of course, not surprisingly, received a renewed flurry of those in the last couple of weeks. So I'd like Ms. Shelton, if she would, to please review for Council the process that is involved with the law that will take effect on July 1st and what the associated timeline might look like.
Okay. So section 15.2, 1812 of the Code of Virginia is the provision in the state code that deals with monuments. And that will change as of July the 1st. Localities will be able to remove, relocate, or contextualize monuments in the city or in their jurisdiction. There's a process for that requires the locality to give a 30-day notice prior to holding a public hearing. Once council holds that public hearing, then city council can act on whatever council's decision is with respect to removal of the monument. Once council takes that action, if the decision is to remove the monument or move the monument, then you also have to advertise or offer the monument to either a historical society or a military battlefield or a government for 30 days prior to being able to then remove or move the monument. So the timeline is at least 60 days from the date at which you advertise the public hearing.
Thank you, Ms. Shelton. Any questions from colleagues for Ms. Shelton? Seeing none, I'll come back and, oh, yes, sir, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to make the point that beginning this process today starts that clock.
The clock starts when the public hearing is advertised. Okay. So whatever day you decide to do that, you need to back up 30 days. And then I need a few days in addition to that to get the notice into the newspaper.
Right. So by making action today, though, the clock starts because we can have that public hearing within 30 days. And then
after the notice is published. So if you gave staff direction and picked your day to hold the public hearing, we would make sure that that was 30 days out so we could put the notice in the paper. And at that point, the 30-day clock starts to run.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Ms. Shelton, I had a couple questions to clarify. Also, I apologize in advance. There's landscaping going on outside, so if you hear some background noise, I apologize. I didn't know in advance they were coming. But Ms. Shelton, so just to clarify, there are legal nuances. So what most of us have seen with the newspaper and with the governor's action, that's different than what we're doing here with the Robert E. Lee statute, because that was within state property.
Yes.
The governor, that was within the governor's powers to remove.
Yes.
And here we are simply abiding by what was prescribed by what the General Assembly session this past spring had laid out for localities to have the option of removing Confederate statutes within our jurisdiction.
That's right. So the process that I laid out is the process that applies to localities.
Can I ask one follow-up question? So some of us have seen what the city of Alexandria has done, and there might cause some confusion. I just wanted to clarify, were they different? And, how were they able to do their process differently than the one that we're moving forward with?
Well, I don't know any more about what happened in Alexandria than what I've read in the newspaper. My understanding is that the United Daughters of the Confederacy came and took their monument back. But whether or not that was the appropriate thing to do, you're going to have to talk to Alexandria about that. I'm telling you what the state code provides for localities, and I would recommend following that process.
Thank you.
So when you had put up, Chris, when you had put up July 13th, that was pretty much the first date that you thought we would be able to have the public hearing and allow for time to put the notice in the newspaper and things like that.
That's
correct?
right. So because of the publication dates and when I have to have the notice to the newspaper in order to have it published, we have missed that deadline for this Wednesday's paper. But we still have an opportunity for Saturday's paper or any subsequent paper. But I need to know what that date is in order to place the advertisement in sufficient time for that 30-day clock to run before council can hold the public hearing. And
So it would be either July 13th, 14th, whatever.
any day after July the 13th.
Correct.
Yes, sir.
Hey, Chris, can you talk about the second part of this equation where when we say we're offering it to other organizations, is that like an open invitation and they've got a certain amount of time to weigh in, and then who decides which one it would go to if we have competition?
Right, so it's a general offer. I did talk to VML about what they thought that meant, and they think that it's sufficient just to make a general offer. So much in the same way that we publish notice, we would publish a general offer for a museum, historical society, government, or military battlefield if they're interested in the monument to offer to take the monument. However, what happens to the monument should council decide to remove it is entirely up to council. So council does not have to accept any of the offers. It's in solely council's discretion what the final disposition of the monument will be.
And at that meeting where there's the public hearing, is that where we would vote for a disposition? And that could be really the end of it from our standpoint.
Yes.
Thank you.
So just to clarify what Ted was saying, if we voted at the public hearing meeting that we wanted to dispose of it, then we do not have to have an additional 30-day period opening it up to other organizations.
No, you do. That's required by the code. But if someone
Okay.
offers to take the monument, you can decide that you will want to allow them to take the monument, or you can choose not to allow them to take the monument. So ultimately, the final decision is yours, but you still are obligated to make that offer for 30 days.
Okay.
If I may follow up, just in terms of the city council's authority, is some of that authority based on the fact that we own the monument?
Well, so the monument was erected in 1908, and it was paid for by public donations at the time that it was erected that were collected by the United Daughters of the Confederacy. I don't have records from 1908. So the title to the monument is not completely clear. The Daughters of the Confederacy will certainly be notified, and if they have interest in taking the monument, that will be their opportunity to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? So come to my colleagues, are we in agreement that we would like for the city attorney to place the advertisement for this public hearing?
Yes, sir.
And do we feel that July 13th is an acceptable date for everyone to have the public hearing?
Maybe we could give folks a few hours after this meeting to consult their calendars and get back with the city manager and city attorney on that.
Okay.
Does that work for everyone?
That works for me.
And I think we should all aspire to try to assemble as soon as possible so that we can make this decision.
Okay, so everybody's good with moving forward?
Yes.
Objections? Okay, Ms. Shelton, do you need anything else from us?
Just when you have the date.
Okay, thank you very much. The next item on our agenda are the items for the City Council meeting of June 11th, 2020. Council preview, Mr. Trivett, anything you'd like to highlight for the general public or for the members of council?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So on at Thursday's meeting, we will have 3 items of unfinished business related to the adoption of the FY21 budget. And then under new business, we have several items that are fairly light. The first is the fiscal year ending June 30, 2020 budget amendment. Then we have an easement consideration for an underground wiring project just outside the city, but on city-owned property. A resolution, or I'm sorry, an ordinance to temporarily move the polling places for the Matoka and Stryker voting precincts for the June 23rd primary election. And then we have a recommendation to the Circuit Court regarding an appointment to the Board of Equalization. And our final item for the day will be to extend the period of time that I can grant the temporary zoning guidance for outdoor dining to at least July 31st, or until the governor lifts the declaration of emergency, or until dining inside is reinstated at 100%, whichever comes first.
Questions for Mr. Trivett? Mr. Maslin?
Drew, could you just clarify how many states of emergency do we have, and is it just applying to one of them?
It is just applying to the one related to COVID-19, and we currently have 2 statewide states of emergency.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, this takes us to the public comment section. If anybody would like to comment on items related to our meeting on Thursday, we'd welcome hearing from you. I believe we have one person on the line.
We do. Caller at phone number 269-8595. I'm going to unmute you now. If you'd please state your name and your address. You have 5 minutes to address council.
Lachey Freeman, 1518 Creek Court, Williamsburg, Virginia, 23185. I'm representing Williamsburg Action. Thank you, council members, for taking a moment to speak with me. I'm not sure if there was a way for me to actually join you guys on video, but I'm not as techno savvy. I should be in that area, and Zoom is giving me problems. But I'm coming to you today. Can you guys all hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. I'm coming to you guys on behalf of a group called Williamsburg Action here in Williamsburg, a group of almost 4,000 members that are all dedicated to seeing an end come to police brutality and seeing a start to racial equality in this country, and specifically here in Williamsburg. I wanted to take this time to, one, introduce ourselves, because I know that you guys have heard a lot about us, but you guys have maybe not actually met us. We are a group of individuals that protest every single day and will continue to protest every single day until we see the change that is needed for there to be equality across the board for all Americans actually comes about. But we do so peacefully. We do so with the support of JCCPD and the City of Williamsburg PD, as well as both of their chiefs. And we are a group that wants to do it peacefully, because we understand that when you do them peacefully, however, you do them uncomfortably, which I'm not quite sure who it was that was speaking, but we make people very, very uncomfortable. But through dialogue, that's the type of change that we believe is necessary to spark conversations that will change the status quo in this country. And anyone that's come out to our protest has heard me say that the more you change the status quo, the more you start to shift the needle towards equality. The first point that I want to bring out, and I don't see the timers, and if someone could please just tell me when my 5 minutes is up, that'd be great. The first point that I want to bring up is the fact that we have police officers that are protecting us. While I love the police officers that have come out, including the ones that have taken a knee, I am very, 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 very concerned about the fact that while we have been protesting, I myself, who is pregnant, almost 4 months pregnant, have been almost hit by yesterday a motorcycle, and 2 days before that a car. And we are watching and videotaping officers see these traffic infractions happen and do absolutely nothing about it. So what we are requesting from City Council is that you look into why that is. Why is it that a group of individuals that are protesting for their rights, but regardless of that are in a crosswalk, can't seem to get a ticket written for an individual who breaks a law? The reason that's important is because there is no impact had unless the prejudice and white privilege that is being used in that moment is used as a teaching moment, so that that individual understands that they did something wrong. Otherwise, it's a slap on the wrist and they're allowed to go. Another point that we want to bring up is that very simple fact itself. The first point was in regards to the police officers not doing anything. However, the very fact that we have individuals that as we are trying to do peaceful protest, we are not dumb individuals, and nor are we so naive to think that everyone is on our side. We have been getting threats. We have been getting indirect and some direct threats. Indirect threats meaning you post a picture of our protests and you say there's more like them at Williamsburg Action, or putting dog poop in the street so that when it's announced where we're doing our next protest and our lay down, that we're in dog poop. People insinuating shooting us with rubber bullets. People going to neighborhoods where they know for a fact we are going to protest, and before we even get there, keying cars so that it looks like we did it. There is and more directly, there is a protester, a white older woman that comes out and she holds the same sign. We've been doing this for so long, but everyone wears masks. I recognize signs now more than people. This young lady comes out a lot and she holds the same sign, and someone decided to drive past her in our protest, take her picture, put it on a Facebook page and say there's more like her, meaning white women who support the Black Lives Matter movement, on the Williamsburg Action page, and directed them to our page. I need to know, as council members that also work for me, how is it that you guys are prepared to make sure that, since we're not going anywhere, this is a long-term problem, so it will not have a short-term solution, how my city council is prepared to ensure that my individuals that are exercising their First Amendment right stay safe across the board. The last point is, what can you guys do? We need to know that each and every single, I know that you guys all work collectively. You guys are all one, and that's great. However, this issue that we're fighting right now needs your individual attention. And I need to know, as chairwoman of Williamsburg Action, that has all of these people coming out, that I can tell them that our city council, either 100%, either 75%, either 50%, either 25%, support our cause. We need to know individually where each of you stand on this issue. So what we are also requesting today is a meeting with city council, one-on-one. I'm not requesting it now. I'm not requesting that we do so now, even though I know that we have Williamsburg Action members who are tuning in live through Facebook. But it is important and imperative that we know where the allies that have the ability to affect change when it comes to policy in the city of Williamsburg, we know where you stand individually and professionally. So we are also requesting a one-on-one meeting with city council so that we may find that out, because we can't truly know who our allies are unless we know where you really stand. Is that my 5 minutes?
It's a little beyond, but I think that's fine. Ms. Freeman, thank you very much.
Thank you.
No, don't go anywhere yet. Don't go anywhere. I just want to say, well, you can watch if you want to disconnect. That's fine. I just want to say,
I'm sorry, I can barely hear you.
Okay, I'll try to speak up. Thank you very much for calling in and sharing your thoughts with us. If you could reach out to the Clerk of Council, Sandy Felico, I'm sure she will do her best to schedule the meetings. And thank you also for asking for individual meetings, because that's much easier for us to accomplish than doing a group meeting, which creates problems under the sunshine laws of the state of Virginia. But Sandy would be happy to help you with that.
Is there any contact information for Sandy?
Sure, you can find that on our city webpage, or if I think I will get that information to you. I know how to do that. I will get that to you.
Okay. If you want, I'm not sure if this is out of my 5 minutes or not. So I apologize if I'm out of order. But I really want to get that information, and I'm just not quite sure how to do it virtually. That's all.
Oh, that's fine. I'll get it to you this evening.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Before you leave, Mr. Mayor, I would just like to affirm to Ms. Freeman that this is Douglas Pons, Ms. Freeman. I'm more than willing and look forward to the opportunity to meeting with you and others.
Thank you very much. We thank you guys for that. Anyone else? Because we need all board members to be on board.
I'm in 100%.
Ms. Freeman, we talked before. I'm happy to meet with you.
And
Ms.
I'm
Benny Zhang.
happy to meet also.
Awesome. Thank you very much, guys.
Okay.
Thank you very
Thanks
much.
a
And
lot.
I'm sure the members of Williamsburg are probably going crazy right in their houses right now, because that's a major move of the needle. You gotta shift the status quo, guys, and you guys are going to be a big part of how that happens, individually, professionally, and personally. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Take care. Do we have anybody else on the line, Mr. Barr? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to background presentation. We have a presentation and discussion of the draft FY21 budget. Mr. Trivett, would you like to take this away?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I'm just going to share my screen here. What we thought we'd do today is just sort of walk through where we are with the budget, particularly as it relates to changes since your last review. I was saying earlier to some members of council that this has been obviously a very strange budget year, in that normally the city of Williamsburg has a budget that's relatively ready for adoption if the council so chose in February. And it largely goes unchanged until we have the public hearing and then receive public comments, and the city council requests some changes based on those comments. And then at that point, we have a budget that's ready for adoption, certainly in May. This year, it's been a very fluid process because many of the agencies that we jointly fund with other jurisdictions have changed their budgets, and we ourselves have had to make many changes to the budget as a result of COVID-19 and a lot of other factors affecting the country right now. So just quickly, I promise not to take too long. We will go over where we are relative to the budget right now. So as you all know, one of the major components of the budget that we had presented was a recommended cigarette tax increase of 10 cents. It started out at 20 cents, and then the council asked us to scale it back. We did that. And then in further review, and particularly in hearing from retailers across the community, decided to change our recommendation from implementing that cigarette tax this year to postponing that conversation until fiscal year 22. Now, I want to be as clear as I can be. We are not saying that we will recommend or include in my budget an increase in the cigarette tax in FY22. But what we are saying is that when we get to FY22, we will be spending some time looking at the cigarette tax and a possible increase. One of the things that we will consider is, of course, state legislation that might change during the assembly in January, as well as what the counties might do with their new ability to impose a cigarette tax. So I expect that issue will come back up again in July of next year. So with that change, that represents about an $85,000 decrease in the revenue model for the budget that we had proposed. That's to be offset by a $40,000 decrease in the requested hours from the parking ambassadors in the police department, as well as a decrease in the overall budget expenditures, including some from the general operating fund contingency. So then another significant change since our last review of the budget has to do with education. Obviously, we have spent a great deal of hours talking about the education funding in the community. As everyone knows, we jointly fund our education system with James City County. James City County requested some reductions in the budget of the school district, and we have collectively worked with James City County's administration to find a way to reduce the impact of those reductions. And I think we've come up with what is a very reasonable solution. So on this slide, I'm showing you, you can see at that first large bullet, you've got the general fund request of $8.8 million. What this budget does is honors that request from the district. So the amount that we have budgeted in the general fund of 8.8 will be available to the school system to spend without reduction. The next number is the sales tax, and I abbreviated it there as sales tax. It's really sales tax for education. And the original estimates for the year were $1.4 million. As we are moving through COVID-19's impacts, we reasonably can expect that sales tax revenue will be less than our estimate. How much is somewhat speculative, but we do have an estimate from James City County that would indicate that our share could be as much as $635,545 less than that 1.4 that was originally assumed in terms of award from the state. We'd like to offset that loss by awarding to the district their surplus funds for the operating year, and that comes to $189,462. And in addition, add to that a portion of the CARES Act funding that the city has received, equal to 22% of the total, which is $287,029. When you take that amount and you subtract it from the loss of sales tax for education revenue of $635,545, you end up with an overall decrease in school funding of about $216,000. Again, that's all due to the pass-through from state sales tax for education being less than expected as sales tax revenues across the state decrease. We think that offset is fairly minor. It certainly will still be an impact on the school district, but one that'd be easier to deal with than the total $635,545. We've communicated this with the superintendent, and I think it is an acceptable solution. So then smaller revisions to the budget include the directive items that we received from City Council, like increasing the Thomas Nelson Community College allocation due to a procedural error. They had applied for the wrong amount. We've adjusted that to match their need. Williamsburg Area Arts Commission, we increased that amount to match last year's award. And then the last two items on this chart are the Williamsburg Regional Library and the Middle Peninsula Juvenile Detention Center. Those budgets were revised by those entities. We received new budgets from them and a revised or amended requests, and we have adjusted the budget to meet those requests. So overall, those reductions were applied to the amount that we would have taken from the contingency as a result of the decrease in the cigarette tax revenue. And then on this slide, one of the questions we had gotten from City Council was that as we look at the list of items that were programmed for Colonial Williamsburg's donation expenses, there were a couple of things that we were worried may not proceed, or at least not proceed as planned. Number one being Independence Day event, $90,000. I think it's reasonable to expect that we won't proceed with a full Independence Day celebration. I think we will try to mark the important day in some way, but it probably will not include thousands of people downtown. And so what we asked Colonial Williamsburg to do is to identify some alternatives that they would take this $1.3 million and dedicate it to if something on their list did not proceed as planned. And so at the bottom of the slide, you can see the alternative funding options. These are the things that Colonial Williamsburg provided. We have talked now for some time about the importance of the community in terms of reopening and making sure that the country knows that we are open for business and willing to accept tourists again, and that we've made it safe for them. And so one of the ways that we would do that is to plan a grand reopening event as soon as it's safe to do so. Could be in July, it could be later in the year, we just don't know. And there's some money that could be available to help program that in conjunction with Colonial Williamsburg and the University of William & Mary. If you've been to the Duke of Gloucester Street lately, you've seen escalation of streetscape improvements. You've seen those areas along the right-of-way that have been beautified, new greens installed, irrigation systems, and even street trees, bringing shade back to the street. For most, I think that's been a welcome improvement and certainly an important improvement to the city's street. And then the last item on the list is the city and Colonial Williamsburg collaborated and installed some dining opportunities on Duke of Gloucester Street, some public seating. Overwhelmingly, the response to that has been very positive. And we have partnered again with Colonial Williamsburg for them to continue to do the maintenance and upkeep of that, including the cleaning during the year. And so some of this money could be dedicated to help offset the cost of that. And then this final slide just goes through, it's a slide you've seen before. I did make some minor additions to it, and that's what I wanted to focus on today. So this slide highlights the fiscal health and forecast staff thoughts as we move into the next fiscal year. And as we reviewed the budget, Councilman Maslin pointed out a few areas where we needed to improve. And so I've added those to steps to consider. If you look at those last two bullets, the first is add performance measures to the review, performance measures review to the budget process. This year, we actually were going to spend some time dedicated to reviewing performance measures established by the departments. Unfortunately, the meeting to do that was scheduled right at the onset of the COVID-19 lockdown. And so we weren't able to proceed with the meeting. And of course, the budget has to go forward and be adopted. So what we have decided to do, Ms. Dameron and I, is to incorporate individual performance measure review as part of those individual department head meetings where we establish what their budget request is. That way we can link the two things together and have a meaningful conversation specifically to those departments. And then the next item is adding a GIO report to the budget document. For years, the city has used a strategic planning process called goals, initiatives, and objectives. This year is no different. We are in the mid-year, which means we will finish this program of goals, initiatives, and objectives out in November and report on that in January. So normally we would include in the budget document a lengthy discussion of what we have done at this point in the year, the midterm report. And we didn't do that this year, primarily because earlier in the year, we announced that we were moving to an online platform to allow the public to more closely monitor what was happening with the GIO process during the year. And I think that's been a fairly successful effort. If you go to the website, you can now see the individual steps required to complete the goals, initiatives, and outcomes, and you can see what the progress is, and it's updated every month. What we did not do is download or print a report from that software to include in the budget document. So that's something that we will definitely do going forward. It won't look like the written text report that was days old, but it'll hopefully be something more in line with the format of an infographic that somebody could find engaging in a way that written text report just wasn't. And with that, Ms. Dameron and I are both available to answer questions.
Mr. Trivett, I'm sorry. If I may, I'll start off with a question and then turn it over to my colleagues. Regarding James City County's estimate of the potential decrease in the state sales tax for education funding, that's based solely on receipts that are collected by the state, and then they use a formula to distribute that money to localities, correct?
That's right.
If we're talking about $600 and some $1,000 out of 1.4 million, that's about 40% decrease in sales tax collection. What are we seeing anything close to that in our sales tax collections?
I'll let Ms. Dameron answer that, but I would say that one of the things that we're going to talk about on Thursday is how our revenue lines are performing against the estimates that we gave you as part of our COVID-19 budget strategy a couple of months ago. And right now we are performing much better than our conservative estimates of how much loss there would be in each one of the revenue lines. So I think it's reasonable to assume that the sales tax number that's forecasted for sales tax for education will be very similar, in that the number that's estimated will actually be higher than the actual loss.
In other words, the decrease in pass-through to the school system will be less potentially than was originally estimated.
That's right. It could be less.
Ms. Dameron, does that?
Yeah, yes, I think that's true, but I will have to say that the collections I have for May are based on March activity, which is, before a complete shutdown. And so I should have in state around June 15th. And I think that will give us a little more information. As you're aware, there's a 2-month delay.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Pons?
I don't have any questions.
Mr. Zhang?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just wanted to quickly ask, I think this is all solid. I think you gave a great presentation. I did note from our previous conversations with these public meetings and with our individual meetings that at some point that staff will entertain a mid-year review that may result in a series of budget amendments from that mid-year review. Is there any line items that you want to point out that we might foresee some sort of adjustment with a budget amendment later on, based on how we're doing with our revenue collections?
I don't know that there's any specific line items that I'd want to bring your attention to. I think that what we will do is when we get to the mid-year, sort of like we did this year, we'll have a conversation about where our revenues stand relative to the overall deficit that we projected, and particularly where we think we'll finish the year FY21 in terms of the general fund reserve, and then make a collective decision about what we should reinvest in if we do have some surplus revenue.
I think that's prudent. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Ms. Ramsey?
No, I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Mr. Maslin.
Yeah, I'd like to thank all my colleagues for protecting the funds for education from day one of the budget review process. Drew, could you explain one of the things that when we went into the budget review process was the information was pre-COVID, and could you explain what other sources of revenue or grants that the school district has to help them with the COVID related expenses?
I will do that to the best of my ability. Obviously, my knowledge is limited because I'm focused on the city, not so much the school side of things, but I do know that school districts across the country are eligible to receive CARES funding in much the same way that we have. I can't tell you exactly how that's going to happen or if it's happened already. I have heard, and maybe Ms. Dameron knows more from talking with the finance officer over at the school district, that there was a line item for CARES funding that came down or is coming down to the school districts for use to offset COVID-19 expenses. I'm sure that that funding will have restrictions just like ours does. So how practical it is to be deployed in a way that offsets losses in revenue that were expected, I don't know, but certainly it could help buy down the expenses that were unforeseen as a result of dealing with the pandemic.
Thank you.
Great. Anything else for Mr. Trivett? Okay, we'll look forward to Thursday. This takes us to City Council communications. Are there any council members who would like to report on any respective liaison assignments?
I'll just jump in real quick to let you know that the Tourism Council has begun spending some of the money that they've held in reserve. As you all know, there was a decision made right at the beginning of the pandemic to withhold spending that money because frankly it would have been useless because nobody was traveling. But as we see the economy begin to open and attractions opening, and we have Colonel Williamsburg here opening on the 14th, some of their exhibits, people are moving around. And so that money is being deployed in the marketplace, and we're obviously hoping for good results.
Thank you, Mr. Pons.
Mr. Mayor, if I could real quickly, Business Council Board of Directors met. This is with the Greater Williamsburg Chamber Tourism Alliance for folks who are tuning in. We considered the MOU that the three jurisdictions crafted in terms of the maintenance of funds, maintenance of effort funds, to codify that, to sign that contractually. Also, I'm aware that the Business Council currently is trying to compile a list of people of color-owned businesses. They're doing this largely from a self-reporting survey, and they're asking the community for help in terms of if they know of any of the businesses, to please directly contact them. You can just Google Greater Williamsburg Chamber Tourism Alliance Business Council. It's wordy, but they appreciate any help or insight that you may give if you have it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zhang.
And just to report that I have no report. The EDA's meeting scheduled for this week has been canceled. And I'm also on the school liaison committee, and our meeting scheduled for April has been postponed or had been postponed, and we don't have a new date for it.
Thank you, Ms. Ramsey. Mr. Maslin, anything?
Yes, just want to report that the LAPC will be meeting Wednesday afternoon. One of the items on the agenda is updating our bylaws, and want to thank Chris for her work on that.
And also, Mr. Maslin had asked earlier today if we could get an update on progress with the group that was appointed by council that's working on the Martin Luther King Memorial, which is really going to probably be more of a civil rights memorial to people within the Williamsburg community who've contributed greatly to the cause over the years. And so it'll be more of a collective effort than just a singular focus. We will try to get some information on that by Thursday. The group, like many other groups, has not been able to meet for several months, but we'll get an update for you and share that. Okay, if that's all that, we have scheduled meetings. Mr. Trivett, anything you'd like to highlight?
I think that was a pretty good rundown of the schedule from the city council members there, but just one thing that wasn't mentioned is Business Roundtable will be tomorrow. It's another virtual meeting, and the speaker will be Jim Carroll from the Hampton Road Small Business Development Center. and he'll be talking about COVID-19 recovery, so it'd be a good one to tune into. And then Planning Commission will meet, I think, next week, and it will also continue to be a virtual meeting.
And if I may mention, just for the general public's awareness, Thursday at 3 different times, our 3 local public high schools will be doing processions, automobile processions down the Duke of Gloucester Street. I think they're at 9, 12, and 3 o'clock or something close to that. And then Friday evening, Lafayette will have their diploma conferral out in the parking lot at Busch Gardens with a stage set up so that families can drive by their student, get out, walk across stage, get their diploma. And Jamestown and War Hill will have their diploma conferrals on Saturday. Okay, if that's all we have, we'll go to open forum. Do we have anybody on the line, Mr. Barham? Nobody's on the line. We'll give it just one more second in case we have somebody on the phone who's listening. There's sometimes a delay. Seeing nobody call in, I believe we have closed session today, Mr. Pons.
Yes, sir. I'd like to move to go into closed session pursuant to section 2.2-3711 of the Code of Virginia for the purpose of discussing one personnel matter, subparagraph 1, concerning appointments to boards and commissions.
Is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Felico?
Mr. Maslin,
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey,
Aye.
Mayor Freiling,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pons,
Aye.
Mr. Zhang.
Aye.
Council will take a very brief recess and hopefully virtually reconvene in closed session, assuming the technology all goes according to plan. We'll see you in the other room. Open session. Mr. Pons, do we have a motion of certification?
We do, sir. And it reads as, I move to approve the certification of closed session pursuant to section 2.2-3712 of the Code of Virginia.
Is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Felico, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Maslin,
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey,
Aye.
Mayor Freiling,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pons,
Aye.
Mr. Zhang.
Aye.
We have any other business for council today? Anybody else? Seeing that we have none, do we have a motion for adjournment?
I move to
I move
adjourn.
that we adjourn.
Second.
Okay, Ms. Felico,
Mr. Maslin,
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey,
Aye.
Mayor Freiling,
aye.
Vice Mayor Pons,
Aye.
Mr. Zhang.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.